Welcome to our podcast, Masters of Change, a conversation with changemakers powered by Bizom. I'm Akshat, and today we have an extraordinary guest with us. He has served Indian consumers for over 20 years with our beloved beers, Kingfisher and Heineken. Born in Goa, India's favorite destination, Perry Goes was a part of the management team that led the growth of United Breweries Limited as the Chief Strategy Officer for more than 2 decades. Perry, a very warm welcome.
Thank you.
You've spent 25 years driving change across a large enterprise such as United Breweries Limited. And from people in the know, I've come to discover that you've been able to fundamentally change the way strategy plans are viewed, right? From slow moving, decade old strategy plans to quick annual actionable plans. How did you manage to pull it off in an elephant like UBM?
Thank you, Akshat. Actually, there's a little bit of a misunderstanding in the general public on how companies like United Breweries do their plans. We operate in an environment where the regulatory structure changes every year across 23 to 25 different states. So, to that extent, embedded to a static plan really never helps any alcobev company. But yes, we were in the mindset of long range plans or looking at linear kind of behaviors and linear kind of expectations. Over the years, I think what we have realized is that multiple things are changing rapidly, be it on the consumer behavior front, and that goes beyond alcobev as to how they think and consume brands, how they live their lifestyles, to the kind of offerings that are available to them, from classical, one size fits all kind of a beer to multiple kind of variants that are coming in, to the kind of exposure levels that different consumers are having. I'll give you an example. Only people who used to travel abroad, say to the US or to other parts of Europe, Australia, would know what a craft beer is. Today, people who have not even traveled beyond their state would know what a craft beer is. Okay. So to that extent, those kind of changes led us or compelled us to ensure that we have plans that are far more agile, far more dynamic, and far more cognizant of the ecosystem around us, rather than just looking at it from a manufacturer to one monolithic consumer definition.
Makes a lot of sense, and especially today when consumer demands are changing so fast, and more or less beer consumption is becoming very synonymous with how a typical snack industry functions, right? Impulse buying is getting more and more prevalent these days. I mean, knowing how you and your team have functioned in the past couple of decades, technology has been at the forefront of these large change management initiatives. But along with technology, one thing which goes hand in hand is the human change management element. In your experience, what is the significance of this human change management, which, if not driven synonymously, if not driven in tandem with the technology, can bring down large scale enterprise projects?
Good question. See, the way I fundamentally look at it and the way we looked at it in UB was this. Every morning, you get out of your house, and 5 minutes away from your home, if you discover that you left your cell phone behind, you turn around and go back for it, right? 3 decades ago, your phone call would be on your landline. Today, you realize the benefit and the value and the convenience this device brings to you. Nobody told you to change your behavior. Nobody put a structured program that you should check your WhatsApp messages even before you brush your teeth. You do it, you bring change in yourself because you see the benefit in it. So the way we drive any kind of adoption of technology, any change that comes out of it, is by focusing first on the benefits that the technology brings to your job. Like when we rolled out SFA, for quite some time, much against the opposition of the people who were looking for ROI on that investment, we ensured that using the SFA tool was not mandatory for the salesman. We said use it if it helps you achieve your sales targets. Over a period of time, people realized that the benefits that were coming out of the SFA tool were helping them do their core job, which is sell more, sell better. Okay. So, change management was driven by identifying and leveraging the value proposition that it delivers to the person who has to make that change. I mean, it's as simple as that.
No, makes a lot of sense. I mean, technology without benefit is of no use. So definitely that is the right approach to take, which is what we've observed across our customers. Um, Talking about technology and slightly moving to a more day-to-day thing, which is your favorite technology, something which has transformed the way you function outside of the RTM world?
One is WhatsApp, and the other one is YouTube. I mean,
Okay.
with WhatsApp, I'm in touch with things that are happening in my ecosystem, and I get information that I need to. So, for example, to make it really real, my parents have not been keeping well for the last 2 days. So, the attender keeps on sending me either their temperature readings or whether they've got fever or whatever. I don't have to make a phone call. That message is there for me to, to be aware of those things.
Makes sense. And of course, YouTube has completely, it
YouTube
has
has changed the way
democratized
we
education.
discover how people are looking at solutions beyond our own narrow circle. So, for example, if something is not working, you take a laptop, you want to do some Excel formula. In the past, you have to have an Excel manual or you have to part of a users group or whatever. Today, you go to YouTube and say, I want to do this on Excel. How do I do it? So
Hmm.
simple as that. Right to repairing equipment, or something is not working at your home, or something is not working in your office. Somebody out there has done it, and
Right.
YouTube brings it to you in a convenient form to consume.
No, makes sense. In fact, talking about transformational technologies, what we've noticed also, and I completely agree with you, right? The technology change management has to go hand in hand with the human aspect. And as long as the users, end users, are able to see the benefit, even a basic layer of digitization, something uh, elementary as a Salesforce automation, can be transformational in itself. However, at Bizom, what we have been exploring and we've been able to achieve to some extent is how are we able to drive actual business outcomes via these RTM initiatives, right? So, talking about that, right? Talking about your experience in UBL, was the RTM automation you deployed, was it able to impact the width of distribution? Along with that, did it help in identifying the outlet potential in any way?
Let me answer that in two parts. Traditionally, in any alcobev company, the way of recording or supervising or monitoring a salesman's job was to look at something known as the DSR, which is a daily sales report, which is a paper animal. Over a period of time, assuming a salesman makes 10 to 12 calls per day, in a month, you know the amount of data that's generated. Most companies stopped at this point, didn't actually get around digitizing. And the larger the company you are, the more difficult that is, because you have more number of salesmen, more number of outlets that they go to. Eventually, what was happening was this became an additional burden or a job for a salesman to do, which didn't add any value to the company. The company was sitting on information acquired through other methods where there were insights which were not of any help to the salesman. So the first thing that digital transformation did through Salesforce automation was to ensure that we were able to push out the right level of insight to the salesman, which was bespoke, customized to that outlet. Now, what that does is empower the salesman to push his agenda, which is specific to outlet, which leads to the next point, which is what is the agenda? His job is to sell more and sell in more, right?
Correct.
So one is increasing the depth, the other one is increasing the width. But how does he choose where he puts in effort? We were able to use the Salesforce automation platform to push all the powerful, rich analytics we were doing in the backend to help him identify, saying this outlet, you can push so much cases of this particular brand Now that could mean either they were buying lesser of the brand, so you could get a depth engagement lever, or that outlet was not even buying that brand, so you get a width engagement lever. So using the power of both analytics and the Salesforce automation tool, we were able to expand both depth and width. In fact, that was a regular monthly file that is to go to every salesman through his device.
Very interesting. And so, talking about targeting, right? I mean, targeting not only changed the way a salesman operates, like we have unicorns built on the technology of targeting. And being in the industry, we understand the importance of the right SKU or the right nudge at the right time for a last mile sales guy. Not only is a last mile salesman, I would say, overstaffed with multiple duties he has to do. Along with that, he doesn't have all of the data in his mind to process the right nudge. With RTM technology in the picture, right? I would love to understand from your experience the kind of role RTM tech has to play in NPD launches. So, whenever you're launching new products in different markets, what role does RTM have to play? And this becomes especially more interesting with the current trend, with many new entrants coming up in the beer market. How do those tech first NPD launches help a large mammoth like UBL protect its market share?
The alcobev market in the country actually has got two layers. One, there are limited outlets, not more than 90,000 outlets plus minus at any given time. Now, for the size of our country, that is, a very narrow battle zone. The second part is in many of these markets, the retailer has to pay money and buy the stock from a government corporation. So it's not that a distributor or the company can extend credit for new launches. The retailer will buy those products which he thinks will sell from his or her counter. Right? What we can do through technology, RTM technology, both backend analytics and front end, enablement, is to identify those outlets where the new product or the innovation has got a higher chance of success. Because if it doesn't succeed in one outlet, the word of mouth can spread and that can kill the interest of a potential outlet who could go and buy it. So you can layer your launch in a way that you first focus on the high probability of success outlets and linked to the quantum or the quantity of cases that you can place in that, build up a layer of what I call cascading success stories. So that particular outlet knows I bought 2 cases, they sold out, next I'll buy 5 or 10 or 15 or 20. Another outlet hears that this outlet has bought this and sold it out, maybe I can be successful in this. If you were to do a scatter and pray strategy and go everywhere, there will be a significant amount of outlets where you don't get what I call early product adopters or innovators come there, and your story can be then a disaster. Using technology possibly is the biggest boost that NPD in Alcobev would have got.
That is the reason we see a lot of NPDs coming up, even from the larger companies, while the obvious sense says that they don't need to launch so many new products. But in spite of that, we see new products coming in. We also see a lot of new 0.0 products now coming in, available in supermarket stores. Which brings me to an interesting point, right? This category in itself it relies on impulse buying. There is, I would say, limited brand loyalty in the category, right? Visibility plays a fundamental role in, I would say, the eventual counter sale, right? What role or how has technology helped the industry in tracking this visibility of your products, and what kind of changes does this have on the strategy?
Okay, one small correction. When we say impulse, the consumption moment is not impulse. Okay, it's not that you're passing by something and you see it and you want it, because here there has to be a licensed outlet where you have to go to. So the need to consume tends to be a little less impulse. But once you get to the outlet, as you said, there's more of a repertoire purchase basket rather than a single brand loyalty. So, to that extent, the brand or the SKU that's presented in the better fashion tends to draw the attention of the buyer. Again, most beers by and large, from a product perspective, tend to be fairly similar. There's no uh, heaven and earth kind of a difference in the product experience. Yes, there are nuanced changes, but once you go there, if your product is not available, and is not available cold, then your product is not sold. Okay. To that extent, where technology plays a big role is to ensure that you have the right stock at the right place, and if you have visibility to that information well in time to act upon it, it gives you a winner's advantage. The second thing is your entire set of promotions or visibility items or what you're doing there for the brand to be noticed by a consumer, which is possibly one of the areas where not much work was happening in the last couple of decades. If that is done in a effective manner, you're more likely to get better returns on that investment on your on ground activity than otherwise.
In fact, happy to share that we understood this some time back that this is going to be a big lever for the Alcobev companies going ahead. Thankfully, we were able to develop the right technology, so to speak, for tracking these kind of visibility metrics. Right, our AI-driven image recognition has been able to help several of our partners track the whether the product is available at eye level or not, track whether the product is in the chiller or not. Right, one of my personal favorites, one of the sayings which I love in the industry is that if the beer is not cold, it's not sold. So tracking cold stock has always been a big priority, and thankfully now we have the right tech to be able to do that. So that is definitely important. I think that hurdle is solved. But once we do that, eventually we move to an area where we have a lot of data, we have the right nudges, we have the right tech in place, but now the execution becomes fairly important. So I think with your experience, and again I come back to the same point, driving a change management in a large enterprise like UBL requires a lot of clinical thinking, requires layering of project management, right? In that sense, whenever you planned a large project, what were the typical stages of planning that you went through? Number one. And second, during that planning, what is the last mile outcome or what is the final destination which you always have in mind?
See, different people and different companies would approach project planning in slightly nuanced different ways. So, I will try to stick to what I think are the core elements of doing this right. I think most project plans tend to get derailed towards the end of the execution. And that's because at the beginning of the execution, the right questions were not asked. Why are we doing this? What are the clear, observable, or measurable benefits that we want to see? And who is going to be responsible and accountable for what? Okay. The why should talk about the clear benefits. The second should talk about how you're going to measure and have clarity on those benefits, whether they are not. And the third one says somebody has to, hold the can. I think by and large, what we tried to do was to ensure we got these three things right. Did we get it right all the time? Not necessarily so, because this is a real world. But keeping our eyes on these questions, I think helped us do it a little better than just start off something that looked exciting on a PowerPoint slide. Got the board or the senior management very excited, but as you went down the road, you meandered and got completely sidetracked. And at the end of the so-called project plan time, you were neither close to completing anything. What was completed was not meaning anything, and there was nobody to be held responsible for it. That I think would be the core of getting anything done right.
No, I think these three things are so fundamental. And you spoke about observational metrics, right? Something which is something which you can measure and track. And again, another saying or another guiding principle which I really love is what gets measured gets managed, right? Until you're able to measure something, you won't be able to manage it. From that lens, what are the typical yardstick ROI metrics or KPIs which you have when you are launching any RTM projects? Let's take an SFA for example. What would be the typical KPIs you would set right at the start of the project, that these are some things we need to measure on a month to month, week to week basis?
I think that's one place where possibly over the last few years I have a little divergent thought. I mean, I grew up in my formative years on that what gets measured gets managed, and that leads to success. That's why I deliberately use the word observed or measured. There are some things that can't be measured, but if you're a manager who walks, as I say, goes to Gemba and walks the field and works the field, you can observe things. Okay. Measurable metrics, I think they are fairly standard. Everybody knows. I mean, I'm getting more sales. I'm getting, better quality of sales. I'm having lesser customer problems. All those are measurable. But I think we need to keep in mind certain things that are observable. In our business, a salesman doesn't take a sales order, doesn't deliver stock, doesn't collect money. Most markets, for example, Karnataka, the retailer goes to the KSBC outlet, pays money advance, takes the stock himself or herself.
Okay.
So what does a Alcobev company salesman do? He engages with the retailer or the retailer's decision maker to ensure that his or her brands are at the top of their repertoire list. And the way to fall out of it is not to wait for your basket not to be in the order list, is to observe the nature of the engagement of the retail partner. Now, yes, VOC, voice of customer surveys and all that, and net positive scores and all that help, but to a limited extent, simply because they are artificially imposed measures. If I'm a retailer, that survey will come, I will have to give some information, give some feedback. Okay.
Right.
At the time when I'm filling the survey, I'm trying to encompass my experiences over 3 months, 6 months, sometimes 1 year into that 10-minute window that I have to fill this survey, or either the VOC or the NPS.
Right.
What RTM technology should be able to do, and should be used for, is to have a feedback coming in on a regular basis. Sometimes, just a negative comment, there was a problem with my vesicular, your guy has not solved it, or he's given a vesicular problem, you entered into the system, it's taken 4 months for it to be resolved. It's taken 3 months for feedback to go to the retailer saying we are still solving it. So these are the things I think have to be there to supplement measures through observations, and some of them can be digitized. Some of them can be digitized by giving the retailer a platform to be able to communicate to you as and when he or she feels what they feel at that point in time.
Correct.
You can then get a whole battery of this, what I call disposition statements, then you can still get a sense of where you are.
Right. So from a tech perspective, of course, we have done a lot of work. We've done sentiment analysis and done a lot of work in understanding the retailer mindset towards the brand, right? And we have multiple touch points to capture. There is SFA. Then we also have a separate platform dedicated to the retailer. But one thing which really struck a chord with me is you mentioned that a manager who walks the field also observes things, going beyond that typical KPI measurement. As someone who's been at the forefront of these changes or shifts, have you observed a change in the industry from push to pull or pull to push in the past couple of decades? And has technology had any role to play with that?
See, there's this lot of talk about what technology can do, what digital should do, digital transformation, now everything about AI and all that. I think what we should keep in mind, Akshat, is the following. Do we talk about having a telephone anymore? Is telecom a strategy? It's basic, right? So in my view, these are tools to get your job done right. Technology, digital transformation, data, these are nothing but tools to help you get your job done better. If you go back to your question around push and pull, there are times and places where you need a push strategy. There are times when you need a pull strategy. In a very simplified manner, because these are very nuanced ways of doing it, you require a push in the alcohol sector when you're launching new products. Because there is virtually little or no ability to communicate to consumers through the classical mass media around your new product. So your consumer comes to know about a new product at the point of sale or the point of purchase. How do you identify where to put it is an important thing, because as I mentioned, there are limited outlets. Every brand and every company is fighting for visibility in that limited outlet. You stick one poster today, if you come 5 days later, another company has stuck a poster on the top of that. So you need to tend to take more semi-permanent or permanent signages. You ensure that you get the right place for your visi-cooler, etc. How do you know? And this comes at a cost, by the way. Every retailer knows that his square footage is just not for selling alcohol, but making alcohol visible. So how do you know where to put your money? How do you measure whether the money you've put there is giving you benefits or not? Okay. So when you're doing a new product, you do push, you invest significantly disproportionate outlet and see whether that's giving you results. Once you have a brand with volume, with velocity, the large scale, then that should go through pull.
Understood.
Now, ability to differentiate when you switch over from a push to a pull is what makes successful companies and not so successful companies.
Right.
And what tech do you use for either? Is the technology for push different from the one with pull, or do you go with the same standard way of doing things? Is again something which common sense can tell us the answers to.
So now taking this discussion to a very interesting area, right? Wherein and you being at the center of that whole, I would say, supply chain. Or I don't view it as a chain. I view it as multiple stakeholders. So most of our decisions as a brand, as a company, are taken with the consumer in mind. However, with this business, with Alcobev, distribution is one of the key factors for the success or fall of any brand, right? How has technology helped you in managing the stakeholders or distributors in your distributor-led markets, or perhaps in corporation markets as well?
See, I think one of the biggest challenges channel partners or trade partners face is the inventory that they carry. Because in many of these cases, it's a cash and carry business. Carrying too little inventory makes them lose out on business opportunities.
Right.
Carrying too much inventory, they're sitting on stock, especially if the stock doesn't move. Even that is, as I said earlier, it's a product with shelf life, can tend to cause them losses. Not just for the manufacturer, but for the trade partner also, getting visibility to where the stock is at different points in time in the consumption cycle becomes important. There are some places in distributor markets where we get line of sight to the stock till it reaches their warehouse. Beyond that, we don't know which retailers or where it's going to. Even in some corporations give us detailed information as to the stock at different retail level, at least from purchase perspective. Some corporations, we don't get that information. So to that extent, if there was better line of sight to stock at different points, it would help the manufacturers strategize better as to how to supply, when to supply, and what to supply.
One more aspect, especially in the alcohol, which is actually very unique to the industry, is the regulatory aspect, right? Is there any challenge or is there any information asymmetry when it comes to the regulations? Do you find that the different touch points in the supply chain are at different level of awareness when it comes to government regulation? And you often notice that when it comes to this industry, those regulations tend to change a lot. And it's very decentralized. So every state has its own set of regulations and they keep changing it to suit their needs at that point in time. How does that information flow trickle down through the supply chain? And does a principle like UBL have any role to play in it?
Everybody should keep in mind one thing, that unlike many other trades or businesses, this particular industry operates at the discretion of the government. Okay? This is not a fundamental right you can fight for. It is at the discretion of the government. And again, it's a state subject. So to that extent, every state government can decide what is in their best interests. So while we see policies as being different across different states, changing across different states, etc., that I think we should respect the prerogative of the policymaker because they are doing what is right from their perspective. They are not bound to be doing what is right from the manufacturers or the brand owners' perspective. Once you look at it from that lens, then you realize there are some places where it is easier to do business, some places where it's not as easy to do business. The second aspect is that the alcobev industry is a significantly large contributor to the state's exchequer.
Correct.
Okay. So if you were to go to a policymaker with an argument which is based on three things: one, contribution to the exchequer; two, a fair ease of doing business platform; and three, what is best for the citizen or the consumer of that state, you are likely to engage in a more positive manner than if you were to go to them with this whole attitude of it is my right to do business and it is my right to earn profits. That I think by and large, my last 2 decades of observing the industry seems to suggest is a stance that works less often than by putting the state in front. Does that lead to a good situation for the manufacturer? Many a times not. There are times when the state government tends to take price increases from their consumer but not pass price increase to the suppliers.
Yeah.
So even basic inflation is not covered. But that's the risk of doing business in the alcobev industry in India. Anybody who got into the business, I presume, would have read the fundamental constitution and understood that this is the reality.
In fact, looking at the demand of your products, I'm sure many of your end consumers would love that as the fundamental right. So, although I don't see it happening anytime soon in our country, but definitely, right? This brings me to one more point, right? With different regulations, it's not just regulation. Every state has a different go-to-market model when it comes to alcobev. With such level of localization, it's very important to choose a right RTM partner who is able to localize the solution to a particular state, to your particular brand.
RTM technology partner.
RTM technology partner, right? Whenever you were looking out or whenever you were evaluating the right RTM partner, and we all understand it's a long-term decision. Typically, these, I would call it a marriage. It almost, if not lasts forever, it's close to a decade long kind of a partnership. What are the three key things which you look at in a potential RTM partner before you evaluate, sign off, and finally conclude on it?
I think the most important one is flexibility and agility. Given the fact that the market structure itself can change suddenly, either in the month of February or March or April or May or June, whenever that state policy changes. And if the structure changes, if some partner tells me, no, I have got a 6-month lead time to change the structure of my RTM solution, I'll say, okay. So flexibility and agility becomes the most critical one. Okay. In fact, if I were to fill in 10 slots, I would fill 7 out of 10 for them. The next one becomes cost, because the business margins in the alcobev business, especially in the beer business, are very thin. Okay. There are times when if you were to take the same money and put it into the market, you'll get better return without doing any work. Right? But there is a long-term belief that this industry, given that it is a tropical country and the demographic is favorable for this kind of a product, it's a long-term winning bet, which I believe in also. But
Nice.
From a year-to-year principle, cost becomes the second important thing. And I think the third important thing, just not for an RTM technology partner, but for any technology partner, is a partner who has got a consumer service orientation mindset. Okay. That it is consumers' business objectives trump technology brilliance. You can have a technologically brilliant solution, but if the people who are deploying that solution or helping deploy the solution are not able to look at the issue from the customer's lens, then it becomes a little bit of a troublesome engagement.
No, I think makes sense. In fact, we as an evolution or as a, I would say as our journey, we've sort of come to understand this, right? That when you're looking at it from a business outcome purview or POV, uh, the tech you deploy, it has to be agile. There is no other way about it, right? And now we are going more and more fundamental. If you're game for it, I'm coming to a more fundamental question, which so many industry leaders have sort of debated and discussed. Uh, Keeping these three things in mind, which you mentioned, I am asking you now: buy versus build. Does building an in-house solution over a long horizon, 5-10 year horizon, make sense for a large alcohol player, or does outsourcing it makes more sense?
I would think my answer is true for any other FMCG player also, is to ask yourself, what business are you in? Are you in the business of technology, or in the business of, say, an alcohol player or a beer player, the business of making beers? Because it drives two or three things. Your ability to create and leverage those competencies, your ability to hire and sustain those people who come with those competencies, and your ability to have vision to see what are the developments that are taking place in that domain.
Right.
When you're in the beer business, you have the skills and the competencies to make good beers. You have the reputation to hire, attract, and retain good people who know how to run the beer business. And you are looking at a domain of beer, not just with tomorrow, but with the 10, 15, 20 year horizon of how consumers are likely to be behaving in this and how products are likely going to evolve.
Right.
Technology is changing faster than beer.
Right.
One of the things we used to always say in UB is that our life is so much easier. We don't have to get up every morning and wonder whether our domain is obsolete. Beer is not likely to be obsolete in the next 10, 15, 20 years, maybe even 50 years.
True.
Right? Style of making beer may change marginally. I mean, think of the guys who used to write code on a certain platform in a certain language.
Right.
Overnight, they can be wiped out. So, to that extent, when it comes to technology solutions, not just for beer companies, for any companies, I think strategically it would be quite stupid, if I may to use a really rude word, to try to create something which they build in-house. This build in-house used to work well in the 40s and 50s and 60s when your requirement was so bespoke and your systems were so rudimentary that your hardware had to be made to your requirements. The layer of software that sits on the top had to be made to your requirements.
Correct.
So it would talk to your machinery and to your equipment, to your systems.
Correct.
Now, to do that and to maintain that not only requires technology, it requires inventory, both intellectual inventory as well as physical inventory. When who is going to put that much working capital blocked there? I would rather go and buy another brewery or buy more malt with the same money.
No, I think I fundamentally believe in what you said, right? And that's.
But
one
the
of
reason should be
reasons-
clear, because many people try to, especially larger organization, when you can create a department, try to think, okay, why don't we have this in-house? We'll get we'll get advantage. So and so company is charging us a bomb. Why don't we do it in-house? We'll hire so many software people, especially if you're in India and if you're in Bangalore. Oh, we have the software people all around. You can't get software people to manage your Microsoft servers. You have to outsource that.
Correct.
So
Correct.
I think the answer is obvious.
Correct. In fact, one thing which I appreciate about the industry is, and I've seen this across players, that if a large alcohol player is not able to give a decade-long career plan to someone, they typically tend to outsource that operation, and that has worked out really well, I think, for most companies. Coming to the fag end of the discussion, I would want to ask what's on everyone's mind, right? What everyone wants to know, either before launching an RTM initiative, during an RTM initiative, sometimes, and should not be the ideal case.
Oh, I thought you
even
were asking
after.
for what keeps employees happy, because everybody wants to know that. Go ahead.
That's too
So
fundamental.
it will be easier.
We won't be able to cover it in this discussion.
Okay.
The source of happiness, but yeah, what most of the industry leaders are wondering and want to know is that, and while the common conception is that these initiatives they drive top line, what I have personally seen is that the bigger mover of these RTM initiatives is the reduction of cost to serve, right? So how have, and I know for a fact that you've been able to do that pretty successfully. How have you been able to drive a reduction in cost to serve using Salesforce automation, distributor management systems, uh, retailer direct to retailer connects, any other RTM tech that you've deployed over the past couple of decades?
I have two answers for that. The direct answer to your question is, once you have visibility and once you have the information on a timely basis, you tend to spot leakages or losses in your line. The biggest cost elements are not a input cost but a leakage cost. So you cut down on wasted stock or loss of opportunity, etc. So that having RTM system gives you that information in a timely manner to the right person to take the right decision. But in my view, any company that focuses on cost reduction or shoring up their profits through, as they call, intense focus on cost, tend to then get lost only in costs. Because innovation and top line growth, especially in the beer market in India, where the penetration is so low, where just expanding the marketplace can absorb much of our overheads, is a better sustainable mid to long term strategy to grow profitably rather than just an intense scrutiny of costs.
Excellent.
You will possibly be able to shave off leakages to a certain extent, but being able to apportion your fixed cost over a larger outlay of sales is going to possibly give you far more better benefits than putting all your focus and your energy and your effort into just pure cost reduction. I have seen, organizations which have actually culled down markets because said these are not profit-making markets. To that extent, those companies and their brands have been wiped out of the Indian beer marketplace.
Understood.
And those markets which they said were to be culled out are now profitable markets because the Indian beer business is such that it evolves, starts from being not so profitable to somewhat profitable, marginally, break even, to making some profits, to making intense profits. I mean, if you look at many of these markets, if you look at Orissa or Tamil Nadu, I could give you a whole bunch of examples where if you were to look at the market 20 years ago, it was either loss making or just about break even. Today, these are very profitable markets. But once you got out of the market, to get back into it is difficult. As I told you, certain brands, whom I shall not name here, but you can research, have been wiped off the face of the Indian beer industry, and these were strong leading brands.
I am aware, correct.
Okay, so you need to focus on cost. So sometimes you end up building layers of unnecessary fat. You need to focus on leakages, because sometimes you get lazy, and especially with today's data and technology available, it's a very easy task.
Right.
But if you don't keep an equal balance of looking at opportunities, it's a simple thing.
Opportunity loss.
How many of my stocks will go out of expiry is as important a question as to where did I miss a sale because my stock was not there. It's a delicate balance with both data, technology, and managerial experience should help you navigate.
That makes sense. And the best part is you have seen that entire journey of markets being
a part of this, because the beer industry, I think, has been going through this journey for over 40 years.
Correct. And what not just most of us notice is a subtle shift from a certain percentage of whiskey drinkers shifting to or converting into beer consumers. That shift has been there, and of course that is good news for all beer manufacturers and the leaders in the industry. I am expecting a lot more craft beers, a lot more new products to be launched in the future. Would like to conclude this discussion. I think we've had a brilliant discussion, but the cherry on the
There's
cake would
one
be
thing I want to point out,
please.
just for you to reflect over.
Sure.
This so-called big, shift of spirits to beer and craft. Two of the new products launched in the marketplace in whiskey and in, I think, if I'm not mistaken, gin, carry the brand name of two very well-known beer brands.
Correct.
So, and these are large companies. It's not a small startup who says, okay, I want to spread my external market. So, maybe or maybe not there's the shift. Maybe people are saying that the whiskey market is much bigger in India, so we need to take our beer brands into the spirit space.
True.
Whatever. But I think at the heart of it is that when cold beer is made available more easily to young adults who are of legal drinking age in a good environment, beer sales will tend to go up. Because the problem with the hot country is that if your beer is not cold, then it's really not a good experience. Absolutely. And possibly one of the biggest drivers why beer has been at a disadvantage is it was not available cold to the consumer when she or he wanted it.
Correct.
Okay. Then it's better to take a whiskey and put some soda in it, or take a brandy or a rum and put some coke in it. No, your drinking experience has to be pleasant.
But what is promising for the industry is the overall alcohol base is increasing in India, and I think some of that is reflected in the diversification.
Beer definitely will be a winner in the growing trend.
Correct.
It's not going to reduce. Let me put it this way: the salience of beer is not going to reduce; it's going to increase for sure.
Correct. So perfect. I think we'll quickly conclude this wonderful discussion with a quick rapid fire, if you're okay. I have very quick questions for you. What is the biggest challenge every strategy head is facing which tech has been able to solve?
I think an ability to customize the way of working for frontline people who are working there. Because by and large, everybody has got customized offering for consumers, certain customized bouquets for customers, which are the people who are coming in between the consumer and you. But we have a one size fits all for our employees. And especially when you look at it from a Alcobev front-end salesman perspective, being able to match the strengths and be able to support the weaknesses, for lack of a better word, of that salesperson with the requirements of what needs to be done at the outlet could really unlock both your deployment of people, who do you put for what kind of accounts,
right,
and your training of people. Because young people tend to have a high attrition rate. This is something which you don't require a huge amount of technical skills and competencies. So that tends to be using. So that I think would be one big challenge which technology can solve.
Perfect. Second quick question, might not be quick because it can go deep. Your vision for each of the following solutions. Your vision or wish list for each of the following solutions: Salesforce automation, distributor management system, and retailer automation.
I think at the end of the day, this should come seamlessly together. The challenge that the solution provider side is now getting resolved. I think previously there used to be DMS solution providers, there used to be RMS solution providers, there used to be the manufacturer solution providers. I think two things are happening. Solution providers are coming with more integratable packages, if not integrated packages. Right. Large bespoke manufacturer solution providers are keeping, ability to plug in other systems into them. Right. So that integration from the technology provider side is happening. I think from the mindset of the user, that ability to see it, they talk about it, that wing to wing, but to that, whatever you call it, cycle, cradle to grave, and all kinds of things have been thrown around. But an ability to see the power of dissolving the edges of each of this will come at a cost, because they are organized separately. Okay, it will come at a cost of changing the organization design and organization outlook. But an ability to outlock that and reduce the inefficiencies and leverage the power of information flowing smoothly through the system, I think can be a very powerful value unlock.
Absolutely, and we are on our way to achieve and deliver it. One last mantra for our the people who are listening this: strategy with what leads to victory. Strategy with blank leads to victory.
Strategy, from what I was told last Friday, is a 70-year-old field and it has changed in many ways. The only thing that remained constant is this: strategy without execution is a failure. So I think that even the audience would know strategy with execution is the way to success.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Perry.
you,
I had a
Akshat.
beautiful
Pleasure
time.
talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this podcast. I'm sure Perry's insights into customer obsession, innovation, and change management nudged you into deeper introspection and faster action. See you in the next episode as we interact with more change makers.